So I mentioned in a video not very long ago that I have additional things to talk about in regards to sort of falling in between things and in terms of presentation of one's gender. There was the video talking about just the fact that I don't identify as a woman. There was the video talking about presentation as a broader concept, how one chooses to present one's gender to the world, if you are choosing to present it at all, because that was kind of one of the main things there. Nobody owes you presentation of their gender. Their gender is what it is, regardless of how they choose to express it. Remembering, of course, gender is not sex, and that gender is a social construct. So when someone tells you they identify as a gender, that is their gender. It just is. So this time I want to talk about being trans feminine. Again, I'm not a trans woman, but I am very much trans feminine. I am primarily femme presenting, and my transition has gone from a masculine starting place to a feminine spot, which is where I am now. I'm not fully femme every day, but trans femme is an accurate descriptor of me, even though trans woman isn't. And being trans femme, and both not having had nor intending to get any surgeries, can throw people off sometimes and can be confusing. Now, a lot of how I'm going to approach this is from my own point of experience, which is as a trans feminine person who has not had and at present has no intention of ever having any surgeries. As with most things in my gender journey, I know better than to say definitive 100% I will absolutely never do this, because my gender journey's already gone directions where I wasn't necessarily expecting it to go, but my feeling overall on surgeries has really never changed. So why don't we talk first of all about some of the possibilities of if I was to engage in surgical options to assist in my transition and to give me better gender affirming care. What would some of those choices be? Well, there is facial feminization surgery, sometimes called facial harmonization surgery, and it is what it sounds like. And it's actually not one surgery, it is a ton of tiny little surgeries involving the reshaping of the face, often shaving down bone, often softening jaw lines, moving cheekbone structure, things of that nature. I have a number of friends who have had it. It's not something I ever intend to have. I like my face. I know that you can still see masculine remnants in my face. My face has also changed. It's frankly rounder than it was. I used to have much sharper features than I do these days. But I am okay with having this chin, with having this nose, with having this bone structure on my face. I'm okay with it. But that's one thing that's possible. A tracheal shave is another, to shave down the Adam's apple and how prominent that appears to be. Again, the descriptor pretty much says it all. It is literally shaving down this bit so that it is less protruding. To the best of my knowledge, that does not actually affect your voice. Your voice in general is something that you can absolutely work on, but it's going to take voice training. Neither hormones nor surgeries will alter your voice to pitch it up and make it more feminine, which is part of why I don't have as feminized a voice as many trans feminine people do. Because, again, my voice, as I hear it, I'm okay with it. Other things, there is of course breast augmentation, which is not something I've considered because I've been very lucky on the results I've gotten on hormones alone, which I've talked about in numerous videos. I have the benefit of, large-chested women in my family. And so once estrogen was introduced into my system, that side of my genetics kind of kicked in, and here we are. So there's that, obviously, because the results that I got from HRT alone are atypical. While there is generally some chest growth for most trans feminine people who go on some sort of hormone regimen to introduce estrogen, what I got was a lot more than most, and many would prefer to have more than that. So there is, of course, breast augmentation. And then there are other things that are less common but possible. There are things like the so-called Brazilian butt lift. There are there are things like hip implants, which are less common and in some cases not actually something that you may be able to get in the country in which you live, because they're not always considered the safest or the best things to do. But setting those aside, the other surgery, the big surgery, is what is referred to as bottom surgery. Now, people will say bottom surgery as if it is one thing, and generally when they refer to it, they are referring to something very specific, but there's kind of a halfway in between, because bottom surgery, when people use that term, they generally do mean the reshaping of one's penis into a vulva and a vagina. Now, there's another thing at play there, which is testicles. And I really hope that just flat out saying the medical version of these words isn't going to get this demonetized. It might. YouTube's weird, but it is not particularly uncommon for trans feminine people to have an orchiectomy, which is the removal of just the testicles. Either have that and not have the intention of getting full bottom surgery, or have it as an initial step to then later down the line intend to get full bottom surgery, maybe because it's all they can afford right now, or they're just taking things one step at a time, which was how I approached something like my hormones. I was on testosterone blockers for years before I added estrogen into that. And so these are sort of lots of options that are there and available, but I haven't had any of them. I don't intend to have any of them. I've only ever had one voluntary surgical procedure in my life, and it wasn't related to my gender. I had a vasectomy. And given that I would later go on hormones, which will render you sterile, it was kind of unnecessary in hindsight, but I've had that. I've had laser hair removal treatments, which isn't surgical, but I have had that. And that's more just to do with, I hate shaving. I've always hated shaving. Even when I thought I was a man, I hated shaving. But the more outright surgeries are not something that I ever intend to get. And there are many trans feminine people, and trans masculine people for that matter, because for trans masculine individuals, the big ones are top surgery, the removals of breast, and the masculinizing form of body surgery, which is just doing the whole thing in the opposite direction. Now, somewhat related to what I said in a previous video that nobody owes you presentation, nobody owes you surgery either. Someone's transness and their identity is valid whether they have had every surgical option or no surgical options. Because the first thing to keep in mind is these surgeries are expensive. And in many, many, many places are not covered by any kind of medical coverage or insurance. Or if they are, even in some places where that is covered, the wait lists are immense. So there are lots of people who have not had these surgeries because they do not have the ability. It is either not available to them at all, or they don't have the financial means to attain it, even if it is. So that's the first thing to really keep in mind. It is a very middle and upper middle class and upper class position to be like, oh boy, you don't pass. Why haven't you had surgeries? Have you considered how expensive those are? Most of us can't afford them. But beyond that, we don't all want them. I don't. Others don't. Some want some, but not others. As I said, bottom surgery is generally considered like the big one. It's the surgery. But what you physically are in possession of in between your legs does not determine your identity. Your identity is who you say you are. It's not about having had certain surgeries. Now, there is a, movement is not the right word. There is a faction within the trans community referred to as trans medicalists, which consider the only valid form of transition to involve both hormones and surgeries. And if you have not done or are not intending to do both, then you are not actually trans. It's a very harmful gatekeeping position. And also, I'll back up, you don't have to be on hormones to be trans either. Either because you can't afford them, don't have access to them, or don't want them. You are still entitled to identify as what you are. All of this stuff, all of these options, and people going, well, have you gotten this surgery yet? Are you going to? When are you going to do that? Why haven't you done that? Like, this is all gatekeeping you from yourself. These are people coming up with reasons as to why they feel they don't have to acknowledge you as what you are. Again, much like what I talked about with presentation in general. People want you, at the very least, to match their idea of what a man or a woman is supposed to look like. And if you haven't taken every step available to do so, well, guess you're not really that committed, are you? It's all nonsense. And it's harmful. And it's especially harmful when versions of it come from within the trans community. It's deeply unfortunate. Surgeries do not make you trans. Hormones do not make you trans. Your identity being anything other than what you were assigned at birth based off your genitals, that is what makes you trans. The rest of it are ideally options, which you may or may not have access to, depending on your living circumstances. But you're still trans. You're still trans without hormones. You're still trans without surgeries. And as I said, some of us don't want surgeries. While I am perfectly comfortable with things like my face, my Adam's apple, I just don't care. When it comes to the bottom surgery, I'll just say it. I like my penis. And as far as an orchiectomy goes, while I don't have as much of an affection for my testicles, like, I don't have anything against them either. And I don't feel less myself for having the body that I do. I actually feel more myself than I have ever before. And I think I should be allowed to enjoy that. I think I should be allowed to identify as trans femme, without an expectation that eventually I'm going to get all these surgeries. And that's absolutely no shade or shame on anyone who does get them. If they help you be happier with your body and you can get them, I hope for only the best. I have many, many friends who have had many different variations of surgery. I have multiple friends who have had breast augmentation, who have had bottom surgery, who have had facial harmonization surgery. But I also have just as many, if not more, who haven't. And they're all valid. They're all part of the same wonderful, vibrant, diverse community. And I hate seeing them gatekept from within the community or from without. Nobody has a right to bar you from your own identity. So, something to keep in mind is that if you are either unable or for reasons of health, it's not a good option or can't afford actual full surgeries for things like bottom surgery or for breast augmentation, there are other options out there, such as this video's sponsor, the Breast Form Store. On the Breast Form Store, you'll find all manner of things that you can attain to help you better reflect the image you wish to present, whether it be something you want to do temporarily or whether it's something you want to try and do daily or as close to daily as you possibly can. You will find affirming products, prosthetics, specific items of clothing, wigs, and all manner of things to help you be able to look and feel the way you want to. And if you use the coupon code VERA10, you can get 10% off your order. There is a link down in the description. So whether you get surgeries, whether you get things like breast forms, which I used to make use of regularly before having my own, and sometimes I still make use of. I have a chest plate that is still kind of fun to mess around with sometimes. But no matter what extent you are engaging in these options, you are still valid. And indeed, I want you to remember, as I always want you to remember, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. Take care.